Well, if he had a choice, he'd rather be a monster than a mutation. Here's a look at the brand new Mattel Master Universe Turtles of Grayskull Beastman Undercover Henchman. Beastman did not trust the alien outsiders the moment the foot set foot inside Snake Mountain. Rather than become Krang's next mutated experiment, Beastman escaped to strike a bargain with He-Man. What he found instead left him shell-shocked. Sometimes you can find an ally in the most unlikeliest of areas. Before, of course, we get a closer look at the Turtles of Grayskull Beastman Undercover Henchman. Let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. I never thought I'd ever see myself saying this, but Beastman is the closest to resembling an original Masters Universe figure. He's literally just the Master Universe Origins Beastman with a whole bunch of samurai armor over top of him. Because of that, he's going to be the exact same size as the original Beastman. He's about 5.5 inches in height, or the figure's about 14.5 centimeters tall. I got a couple of Beastman figures I can bring in for comparisons. First, here's the new Beastman compared along with the original Master Universe Origins Beastman. Exact same figure. They have tweaked a little bit of the paint. You can see that they've kind of given him a little more of like a samurai face paint there on the top. Other than that, though, they're using the exact same body. Funny, though, what's interesting between the two Beastmans is that Beastman has always been known for having like the monster hand on the one side. This Beastman is one of the most unique Beastmen because it's, I think, the only time we've ever gotten this character, at least of a Master Universe Origins design, that's actually had two gripping hands. Because we've also had a Lords of Power Beastman, same idea, he had the monster hand. We did technically get as well the cartoon version of Beastman, which he did have gripping hands, but yeah, if a Masters Universe Origins figure that you're looking at, you could also really use this hand sculpt if you did want to have, say, the original Beastman. I might even just consider doing that. The original Beastman with two gripping hands. You just pop the one that's currently on the one that from the Turtles of Grayskull. You can easily use it that way. Really interesting that they decided the first time around to give him a two gripping hand system instead of just the one. On this side, we can bring in some of the other figures we've already had a look at from Wave 2. Here's what the figure looks like, for example, next to Shredder. And here's also what he looks like with loose ankles and all next to Ram Man. Samurai stuff for Beastman. We'll just have to wait for a second as we look at the unnecessary insert paper. The paper is there just to tell us once again that you can't swap out all the parts. Funny, though, that in the image here of Beastman, they chose not to just show the image of Beastman's head sculpt. Rather, they put the helmet over top of his head. But judging by the fact that there's not one but two beat points shows you that not only can you remove the helmet, but you can also remove the head that's underneath the helmet as well. You can pop off all the things that are gray, so his side arms, his lower torso, his boots also can be all swapped out. I was a bit of a mad scientist in the early review of Ram Man as I mixed and matched some of the parts with poor Skeletor. Give it time. That's probably going to happen with Skeletor. We're just going to vacate this. This is going to get immediately dropped into the recycling bin. I have smartly decided to have the recycling bin so close to me so I didn't have to try to throw the paper across the room. Failed at the attempt of that and then have to go pick it up later. I just dropped it right into the bin. Dropping bins doesn't necessarily sound like that. The figure also comes included with the mini comic, The Belly of the Beastman. Speaking of Beastman, there he is on the top left corner. Now, he is a little oversized versus the actual character that we get. I would have liked if we could have gotten ourselves a bigger Beastman, considering though he isn't mutated yet. It would make the most sense, obviously, that they're going to be using the exact same body as the regular Beastman, because obviously he'd have to be the same size. Like the look of him, though, at the top corner and on either side bookend are evil Shredder on one side, evil Skeletor on the other. Like the look of that Skeletor. I can't wait for him to come out. I think he's part of Wave 3. If I quickly flip through the comic, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, although had I spent more time on this, I'd actually know why the read-up for why Beastman actually has the read-up that he has on the back of the packaging, because he eventually changes sides because he's not happy with the idea that Skeletor is mixing with DNA and mutating all of his own men. On the side, though, speaking of some of the mutations, you can see that Merman isn't quite looking like normal Merman. And also Trapjaw has been also combined with a Mauser. Very excited to get that figure at some point. The comic also does come into, again, some delving into the backstory of why Beastman does change size. He eventually does get captured by the Turtles. And eventually he does align himself with the rest of the Turtles. Now, again, some of the little teases that we do get for characters here, we have ourselves an interesting looking merman that has a serpent tail that looks to be Webstor, and I think at the top right corner that might be Slash. Looking forward to seeing what they're going to have in store for us when it comes to future waves. On the back, though, speaking of this current wave, we've already had a look at Ram Man and Shredder. We have still yet to look at Raphael. He'll be coming up in an upcoming review. Let's just move the mini comic off to the side for right now. Now, Beastman does come included with also additional things that can hide his identity. I don't really know how he's hiding much of his identity when really still his arms and his legs basically show off exactly who the character is. Though, if you did want to, the figure comes included with a pretty interesting looking shield. What I thought was smart on Mattel's part is if you look at the back of the shield, on the back there's 2 pegs. Oh, do you wonder? Don't wonder any further. You can actually take any one of the turtles and Duncan on the back, for example. Remember they had little holes on the back of their torso? That you can take them and they're universally acceptable. So, like, you can just take these, plug them onto the back, and now any one of the figures can actually wield their own shields. So if you wanted to have this displayed with Man-at-Arms, you could do that. If you want to have this displayed, for example, with Leonardo or Donatello, again, they just attach the exact same way. I'm glad to see that they actually use universally placed pegs. This can also fit into his hand. And because this is one of the only few times that I can say this, Beastman can actually have the shield held in either one of his hands. So let's just grab this hand, which is normally relegated to just basically the monster hand. And this just grips into the provided handle on the inside. Clips on the one side. And then the figure also comes included with this whip. The whip is really neat. It's pretty soft in plastic. I wasn't expecting it to be as soft as it was, but I really like the metallic blue that they used here. Now, it does have a point on the end of it, so obviously that's not the section that's going to be attached onto his hand, but we're going to go ahead and just clip this into his other hand. Boy, it's so strange to see Beastman. I know it's not a big deal, really, but the fact that Beastman actually does have 2 gripping hands is pretty a neat touch. Pretty nice. So tempted to actually kind of pop off one of these hands. I might just do that. Pop this hand off a little bit later and give it to my other Beastman. I know it's not really the classic way of having Beastman designed or displayed. Kind of like the idea, though, that the figure can actually have 2 gripping hands instead of 1. To finish out and round out the rest of his look, the figure has this really interesting looking samurai helmet. I don't really know where he got the design from necessarily. He might have had some inspirational cues from the Turtles. It's a soft plastic helmet, but it's got some really interesting details, and it's really well painted too. You've got the gold there on the front of the face, gold on the side, little side, I guess it would be like the little neck guard that it has for the part of the helmet, and some nice little gold on the top there as well. Really nice. It's a little on the softer side, but at least it fits easily over top the figure's head. It fits also in a way as well that you can still see his eyes. So it would make obviously little to no sense if you're going to be putting a helmet over top of Beastman's existing face and then the character can't even see where he's going. But it gives just enough open space where the character's eyes can still see straight through. It does give him a weird look, too, because it's not something that you're used to seeing. At least I'm not used to seeing Beastman walking around in samurai armor. But it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting way to take a character, first of all, have him become a good guy for a temporary time period. But also, as well, give him something a little bit different to look like, instead of just the regular conventional Beastman body. Speaking of the Beastman body, though, if we just take the shield away for right now, we're going to go ahead and remove the whip. We'll take the helmet off also as well. Any one of these pieces, by the way, can be removable. So if you wanted to see kind of what he looked like without the armor basically is just, let's straighten out his arm. Slides right off. Very easily slides off, although it stays a lot better in place than the original Beastman. This slides right off as well. And then you can just take the 2 halves of his body and separate them away from one another. And basically you're just going to take the 2 halves, put them back together like this. And then if we just bring back in the original Beastman, I wanted to show you guys, there really isn't that much different really between the 2 characters. Lower half of his body is exactly the same. The coloring even for his loincloth is the exact same blue with the same matching golds for his belt. The only thing that's really obviously different is between the 2 is the fact that this one, the original one, had the shoulder armor. This new one doesn't have it. The torso armor is exactly the same, other than this one just has more gold now in the front of it. This one would have had the original blue. And head sculpts are going to be exactly the same as well. I did say, though, that he has a slight change. You can see that he's got these little points right at the top. The original Beastman would have had that. He would have just had basically just a round section of paint. But other than that, like, the head sculpts are going to be exactly the same to one another. Because he only has the little points on the top, it's enough for me to, obviously I'm going to be still sticking with the original Beastman as my go-to Beastman for my origins. But yeah, the fact that he actually has swappable hands, I mean, you don't even have to really swap the hands. If you wanted to, you could really just swap the heads around as well. Exactly the same bodies, though. Now let's go ahead and just get the armor back in place. The armor it's not hard to put back on. I mean, when you're looking at it, I thought for a second, well, why wouldn't they have actually made a little bit of strap to it? But honestly, even though there's not a lot of quarters to fit this through his arm, it fits actually fine over top of his bicep. You just have to like literally slide this up. I just want to make sure I've got this facing the right way here, because I know when I first took this off, yeah, I got it facing the right way. And then we'll go ahead and take the other one here, and we'll just slide it up his forearm, slide away all the way up his bicep. I said the original Beastman had armor that was giving me problems. I mean, that really isn't the case, because the original Beastman, his armor was actually fine. Just get that all the way up his bicep here. There we go. And then the only other thing left to really do is then, of course, if you want to take yourself the samurai helmet, you just put that over top of his head. But I guess even though the helmet is the thing that really does complete the look, still a nice looking head sculpt for a regular Beastman underneath, other than, again, just the only thing that's really different is that little bit of spike that he has on the top for the paint. Other than that, it's the exact same body. Now, because it's obviously using the exact same body, it's strange to see a Beastman like this, because again, like, other than just the additional armor that they've added over top of his body, I mean, it's the first time of this Turtles of Grayskull line that we've been looking at where you actually have an original Origins body being used. The closest thing we did get to that is Duncan, but I mean, like, Duncan would have had a brand new head sculpt, would have had a different color, obviously, body, and he would have had armor that was completely different over the original Origins body or original Origins armor. Beastman literally is just a Beastman body with all extra things over top of it. The gold, for what it is nice. You can see, again, like, there's the influence of the turtles there, so it looks a little like a turtle shell. You got some nice coloring of the gold. You got some nice metallic blues there on the sides. They haven't quite matched the gold. They haven't quite matched, like, the blue, for example. Would have been nice if they could have made some sort of war paint or something there, like, on the front of his armor. Because other than that, like, the fur that he has on the front is no different, really, than the original Beastman, other than maybe just swapping out a little bit of the gold for what was originally the blue. The lower half, again, of the body is exactly the same, so there's not really much to really talk about there. But, you know, again, like, it's a good-looking Beastman. I would almost even say he's my least favorite from this second wave, even though we really haven't yet looked at Raphael. Raphael, obviously, if you're going to be collecting the turtles, it's important, it's imperative to be getting yourselves then Raphael and Michelangelo. Michelangelo we're going to be getting in the third wave. But I kind of feel like just Beastman seems like, from a story standpoint, at least they gave him something to do. But I think from a figure standpoint, it feels like sort of just a thrown-in figure. Like, he didn't seem to have any other purpose than, like, let's just grab a figure that already exists. Oh, I forgot to actually put on his skirting back. Let's just put his skirting back on here. Yeah, I feel the only thing about Beastman is, taking this back off here, is that with Beastman, he just feels like it's Mattel coming up with, well, we have a figure, let's just take one that we already have from our inventory, and let's literally just slap armor over top of him. He's not quite, well, like, Man-at-Arms, at least they did something a little bit differently with him, but with Beastman only really just being things added over top of an existing body, again, I just don't feel he's as interesting as the other ones that we've already had a look at. Because he's also using the same Beastman body means that he's going to also retain the exact same articulation. So head's going to be on a ball joint. Once again, it does look up, down, back, and forth. Has still the same waist swivel. Waist swivel is going to be a little harder this time around because he just has the skirting of the samurai there. So you're going to find yourself, as you're trying to twist the waist, that it's going to be rubbing up against the plastic. See how it's kind of rubbing this section here to this section here. So you can feel there's a little bit of resistance there. Arms do come out, luckily, because the way they've placed the shoulders, the armor is far enough down that it doesn't impede the articulation here for the shoulders, and it's far enough up that it doesn't impede too much of the articulation when it comes to his elbows. The arms still rotate back and forth, they're still fine, and you can rotate the hands all the way around. The legs do split out. Because they actually cut the sides of the skirts, both on the front and on the back, it means you can easily still split the legs for Beastman. You bring the legs forward, you can bring them back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh. Still, you got the single hinge on the lower knee. Allows the lower leg to rotate. And about halfway up the calf, there's a swivel cut. Normally, that swivel cut would be there to accommodate a boot, but because Beastman literally is just wearing, well, it's just his feet down below here, the swivel is only there just to cut into his leg more than anything else. He has an ankle pivot back and forth, ankle rocker that also moves back and forth as well. I will say, at least, like, Beastman has some pretty tight joints. I mean, that goes with the territory. I would say normally goes with the territory with getting a figure that's brand new out of the packaging, but unfortunately that wasn't the case when we looked at Ram Man. Speaking of Ram Man, speaking of the other figures that we've already had a look at from the second wave, there's what he looks like once again with Shredder. Here's what he looks like with Ram Man. The only figure we've still yet to look at is Raphael wearing his Ram Man style of armor. I like either one of these figures. The one in the middle, though, the one that we just happen to be looking at in this review, poor Beastman, I just feel like he is a bit of an afterthought, but at least they took the time to flesh out some of the character's backstory or some of the character's motives inside the mini-comic. If it wasn't for the mini-comic, I feel like the character would just be looked at. I certainly would be just looking at him and like, well, why is Beastman wearing samurai armor? It's a strange choice for a character like him, but at least they fleshed it out in the mini-comic. I don't think I would say it's a character I would recommend picking up if you're kind of on the fence and you really only want to be hand selecting some of the characters from these new Turtles of Grayskull. I would honestly only pick up the ones on either side. Beastman I don't think is one that you necessarily need to pick up. As you can see, he's taken a fall. Wow, so wait. So Beastman gives up his longtime loyalty to Skeletor to go join forces with the Masters and the Ninja Turtles to go and stop him. I think we can kind of know the direction that this story is going to be taking. In fact, if you look to the back end, the last couple of pages of this mini comic that comes included with Beastman, we already sort of know where his alliances sit. And while maybe alliances are pretty short with the Turtles, the longevity of the figure at least is going to be a little bit longer. Now, granted, this is just a Beastman underneath this samurai armor. I mean, the fact that you could take off all the armor anyways, and you're getting basically just the same Beastman body that we already got before, means that I just feel like the figure is a fill-in for what could have been potentially something better. Advertised actually, in fact, on the back of the packaging, we have samurai armor Beastman fighting what seems to be a mutated Mossman. Mossman, I think, would have been a little bit more interesting, but if you wanted to align everything with the mini-comic, I guess Beastman is a worthy inclusion. He just isn't as worthy of an inclusion when it comes to the actual figure. At least in the story, he's got backstory. At least in the story, he's got some relevance to him. But I feel like having this guy on the shelf, it's gonna seem a little out of place. Like, where am I supposed to put this guy? Am I putting him with the rest of the Masters for right now, at least, or am I just gonna put him with the rest of the Skeletor figures? What am I gonna do with Beastman here? At least Rayman had a mutation to him, and Shredder was just awesome. Beastman sort of just seems to me like, let's just give a figure that we already have armor, and then we'll give him a reason to wear that armor in a mini comic that comes included with him. The armor, for what it is nicely painted. Some really nice rich golds and blues get incorporated to the samurai armor that he has. He has a nice interesting whip, and he has a pretty cool looking shield that doesn't even have to necessarily belong to him. Being that they also use the same universally placed pegs on the back of the shield means that you can also use it with any one of the other figures that we've looked at. And it can also attach onto the back of Duncan's torso, Leonardo's, and also Donatello's. I don't know yet if it's going to attach onto the back of Raphael, but it seems like Raphael also comes included with a shell shield. So my guess is you probably could use the shield that also comes included with Beastman as well. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. Short of how he appears in the mini comic, do you think that Beastman should have been included in this line? Certainly like to hear what you guys think down below in the comments section. In the meantime, though, if you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you're still on board to see the review of Raphael, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and you're turning on the bell notification. Of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.